Hello dear viewers, and welcome back to another episode of a Perambulate with Picard. I am walking home from work today, and we're going to be talking about Stardust Zity Rag, episode 5 of Picard. Now this is an episode that is broadly comedic, but starts and ends with two quite harrowing sequences. So let's kick off with spoilers straight away. Icheb is back very briefly and is killed brutally. And we actually had to pause during the opening credits, and yeah, literally we were welling up. Really good performance from the new actor playing Icheb. It's not Manu from Voyager. It's also not the older Icheb we saw in the Voyager episode Shattered, I think. It's a new actor, but he does look a bit like that older Icheb. Now look, I'm not quite sure of that decision, of why that decision was made, I should say, but I have to say it took me out of the episode for a moment because I recognised it wasn't the same actor, but I'm sure there's a production reason for that. We also have Bruce Maddox back in this episode, not played by the same actor. And I did check, and the original actor is still with us. But the scene itself, wow, a tour de force for Jerry Ryan, of course. Little note of continuity in that Icheb does not have a cortical node, because he gave up his cortical node to save Seven. So this episode obviously continues the tradition of opening with a flashback, but this time it's not a flashback about Picard or Romulus or the Synth Uprising. This is a flashback explaining a little of what Seven's been up to since we've last seen her. I kind of like the fact that Seven didn't go into Starfleet, because it's something she very much resisted during her time on Voyager. And it fits the character that she would choose to help out in a less structured way, but, still working within a collective. That being said, we don't see any of the other Fenris Rangers, but we're told there's very few of them about. Now, Seven joins the crew on their journey to Freecloud, which brings us to the comedic part of the episode. And yeah, this becomes basically a heist, with Rios and Picard adopting some outrageous personality traits. I have to say, I love Rios's extravagant outfit as, I think, a tracer, they call him. And yeah, he just is very uncomfortable in this because, as we've already established, he is sort of philosophical and existentialist and not larger than life. He's very silent and very broody. But even without the sort of drug that kicks him, into more confidence, he's done pretty well before that point, it has to be said. I think so, anyway. And then we get Patrick Stewart's outrageous French accent. It's been a long-running gag for Star Trek fans that Captain Jean-Luc Picard from France speaks with an English accent. And it's never really been answered on the TV show why that is, especially when his brother, who we meet in Star Trek Next Generation, does speak with a French accent. And so Patrick Stewart put on a terrible, outrageous French accent, topped off with the eye patch and beret. It's just incredibly entertaining. And, okay, it's a turn for Patrick Stewart, but Captain Picard has expressed a love for the theatre and performance before in the Next Generation, so it's not inconsistent with the character. Meanwhile, Raffi has her own story beat, and it was so well played. I really, really applaud the actress for that scene where she meets her estranged son and his wife, but they turn her away. And just from a thematic point of view, she says that she's over all this, but she's joining Picard on a mission to investigate synths. So we know she's not over this, even before possibly she realises it. Is her son's rejection... Gabriel's rejection of her a bit cold? Yeah, but it's self-preservation on his part. You know, he obviously went through a lot through his mother's expulsion from Starfleet and her struggles with addiction. But it's a nice little touch that earlier on, when Picard called Raffi and started talking to her about Bruce Maddox, she said, "I'm not looking for your mission," and she's not. At that point, she's looking for Gabriel, and it just so happens that the two missions coincide. Now, we need to talk about this week's main guest cast, Bajazi? Bajazel, that's it, Bajazel. Interesting choice to cast someone who looks so much like Marina Sirtis, Counselor Troy in Star Trek The Next Generation, to the point that for a moment you think it's her. Excellent performance, a really likeable villain. I've often felt that Star Trek kind of struggles with one-off villains. A lot of the recurring villains, or antagonists, are very good, but for their one-off villains, I mean, if you look at Insurrection, F. Murray Abraham, for instance, great actor. Malcolm McDowell, great actor, but villains don't always fit into Star Trek, and I think what makes this work is that it's very clear that she has a life before this episode. You know, she doesn't exist solely to complicate the lives of our heroes. She doesn't have much of a life after this episode, of course. But she, you know what, she's very enjoyable in a sort of Servalan from Blake 7 kind of way. And, of course, she has Bruce Maddox. It appears she's been bankrolling him because he's in debt to her, but she's the one who set the Tal Shiar on him, which is fascinating. That's fascinating to me. Now, unfortunately, we may not discover her agenda. Could it have just been that the Tal Shiar were paying her more than his debts? I mean, I hope it's something as simple as that. But yeah, it's going to be hard to find that out unless I missed it in the dialogue. Seven's final scenes with her, you know, it's funny. A few months before Picard, I finished watching Voyager for the first time with my other half. It's one of his favourite treks, as I've mentioned before. And I enjoyed it a lot more than I did when it was first on and I was around, 16, 17. I think I was taking science fiction a bit too seriously then. And when Seven beams back over with the two phaser rifles at the beginning of the scene, I felt very uncomfortable. I'm like, what's Seven doing? Why is she acting like this? But taking the whole episode into account, you can understand why she does what she does, and this is a character who's 20 years on from when we last saw her and has had this retribution in mind for the past 13 years. I thought it was brilliantly performed. I definitely think we're going to see Seven back. We cannot have Seven not meet Hugh. I mean, come on, 2 former Borg drones rescued by Starfleet captains? Has to happen. And, you know, she gets the typical sort of heroic sequel hunting exit, and if anyone can get out of that situation with multiple guards coming at her with phasers, it's Seven of bloody 9. So we will see her again. But then, Agnes. Oh, Agnes. When she was standing off while Picard was talking to Maddox and looking conflicted, I thought, where is this going? What's happening? And she kills him. She kills Bruce, you know. We find out that they had a relationship. And, yeah, she kills him. But I think what's happened is Commodore O has told her something that we don't know and Picard doesn't know about the synth uprising, which makes her want to abandon synths and abandon their research and decide that Bruce is too dangerous to live. The question is, though, how will she stop the EMH from talking? I mean, obviously, she's very intelligent and she's a scientist, but her expertise is in synths. Bionic computers, if you like, not holographic systems. Is she going to reprogram it? I like the idea that he can switch himself on based on medical emergencies he senses, but there's no override. Mind you, I suppose Rios would want his holograms not to be able to override his commands, so I suppose that makes sense. Look, after my disappointment last week, this was a really great episode. Elnor again didn't get to do very much, but he kind of got the Data-y moments. You know, he got the moments where he got to question the human condition about lying, but he seemed quite amused by it, and I like that. So even though he didn't have much to do in the plot, he didn't even get his sword out at any point, he was still entertaining to watch, and the team is really starting to come together. But it'll be interesting to see what happens to Agnes after this, because I don't see how she can hide what she did to Bruce. But that's enough about what I think. Let me know what you think down there in the comments. I will be back next week to discuss the Doctor Who finale, as well as the next episode of Picard. But until then, thank you very much for watching.